More music from you after this talk. Have you heard the new term Corona coaster? It's defined as the ups and downs of a pandemic. One day you're loving your bubble, doing workouts, baking banana bread, and going for long walks. And the next, you're crying, drinking gin for breakfast, and missing people you don't even like. That's not exactly what my experience has been of the pandemic, but as the weeks turned into months, turned into years, I could relate much more to the second half of the definition, right? And one of the things that I noticed is that I wanted things back to normal, back to my normal, right? Especially as it dragged on and on. And fortunately, at least in my life, it is pretty much back to normal right now. But we've all had experiences where it hasn't come back to normal. We're working with Elizabeth Lesser's book, Broken Open. And in fact, Sue and I are finishing up the book with this week and next week's talks. This section of the book is called The River of Change. And it's all about the importance of opening to change. Elizabeth writes, "Life is always changing. We're always changing. We live in a river of change, and a river of change lives within us. Every day we're given a choice. We can relax and float in the direction of that the water flows, or we can swim hard against it. If we go with the river, the energy of 1,000 mountain streams will be with us, filling our hearts with courage and enthusiasm. If we resist the river, we will feel rankled and tired as we tread water, stuck in the same place." There's so much truth in that statement, but Elizabeth is exactly right. We have a choice about how we are going to respond to change. But often, it's hard to remember that we have that choice. You see, as human beings, we uniquely have desires, we have loves, we have attachments, and those things can be very strong in us, to the point that when things don't go the way that we want, or things don't come back to the way that we've learned to love them, or when we lose a person in our life that was an important support, an important love in our life, we suffer. And often we feel victimized by it. And it doesn't seem like we can get out of it. It just, we continue to grieve, or we continue to be in pain about it, and we're angry about it, and we're frustrated with it. As I reflected on the changes in my life, most of the changes in my life have been sort of circumstantial, things that have changed in my outer life, you might say. This week, I really was opened up to what it's like to have your ability to engage with life changed. One of my friends talked to me about the impact of a brain injury on her. My mother reminded me of the impact of a stroke on my grandfather, where you lose so much because you can no longer do like you used to. The capacity is no longer there. And Elizabeth Lesser told her own story of that in this section where she talked about menopause. And for her, she always thought menopause would come late for her and it would be a breeze, right? Not the case. Frustrating, isn't it, how life often doesn't quite go like we thought it should go? So hers came on early, came on in her 40s, and came on with a vengeance. She writes this: "Each morning I woke up confused and afraid. What was going on with me? I wondered with alarm. Where was the zest that I had become accustomed to? Where was my faith in the meaningfulness of life? Why was I so depressed and anxious?" You would think I would have recognized the signs of another phoenix process, right? The phoenix is the dying of something and then rising again out of the ashes. You would have think that I would have known not to strain against the changes, but to surrender to the flow of the river. You would think that I would have realized that an old part of me was dying so that a new part could come alive. But she didn't. And I wonder for you, when we're caught in those experiences, have you recognized them as change? Or have you gone into resisting and fighting? Can you relate to the disorientation and the terror that she was experiencing, and how much emotion and reactivity can come up when things change in our life? You know, we talk about change all the time in this community and how important it is to welcome it. But lately, I've come to realize how difficult it can be, because when our reactivity comes up, which is not necessarily the ego, but the attachment to things, you know, the attachment to being in control, the attachment to things being the way we like them or the way we're comfortable with them, that's the ego. And when it comes up, remember that unity saying that says, ego edges God out. We naturally constrict. And when we constrict, there's no room for the activity of spirit. Why is the activity of spirit important? Because you see, the activity of spirit is everything. It is the sense of support that we can do it, the courage. It is the love, right? Have you recognized with love how you relax into love, how we can trust in love? We feel compassion for others. We feel value for ourselves. It is the exact polar opposite of when we're constricted down by ego. This week I was talking to a friend, and he said, when we exclude some part of our experience, we narrow the space for our Christ nature, for our true nature. And do you see, whenever we can't just embrace what's happening, then we're rejecting it. We're rejecting, we're not including it in the experience. I mean, how many of you, well, I'll just own up for myself, never once during the pandemic did I say, wow, this is cool. I wonder what my life is going to be like after this. No, the whole time I was like, when are we going to get back to normal? Not really wanting to face the sense of potential loss, not wanting to face how out of control it would have felt to me if life totally changed. And yet Elizabeth's experience is very true to form. When we're caught in it, we're caught in it. And it can be very hard to remember, you know, that, hey, I need to make some space for spirit here. Elizabeth Lesser was a midwife as in her career. And she was asked by some friends during this whole time of her menopause and this being caught and really struggling and feeling alone, she had been asked if she would come in and help one of her friend's daughters have a baby. And it's really wonderful what happens as we engage with our lives. You know, as stuck as we can be, She was driving to the hospital after getting the call. She's driving through a wooded area when all of a sudden a line that she knew from Dante's Inferno came to her, and suddenly she could see, oh, I'm resisting. I'm not open to the changes that are happening in my life. I'm not embracing them, I'm fighting them. That's why I feel so alone and so disoriented here and so afraid. And she pulled the car over and she prayed. And I want to read to you what she said. Like an animal drinking fresh water after a drought, I dropped my head and I began to pray. Thy will be done, not mine, I whispered into the night. Thy will, Lord, not mine. As I sat at the side of the road, I felt the tension of willfulness and worry melt away. I stepped to the side and gave way to something wiser than myself, to the mystery that knows the truth about the past, the freedom of the present, the route of the future. It's great, right? When something happens in our lives that breaks that pattern of feeling victimized, of being caught in our emotion. And this is the beauty of guidance. We don't talk about it very often, but guidance comes to us in so many ways. That line from Dante's Inferno, something that works to break us open, because Spirit isn't really interested in you walking around being all constricted all the time, because you're the only way Spirit gets to know what it's like to live on this planet. And so it's always working in us. But do we have to wait? Do we have to wait till it breaks us open? I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the proverbial 2 before. I want to be more proactive. I want to invite Spirit more into my life. And so how powerful, right? What if we started every morning saying, not my will, but thy will? Might cause a lot of chatter in my head. And yet, what a great reminder. And I was so happy that she prayed, because this is a fairly long section. And I kept getting the message, how does prayer, the question, how does prayer play into creating the space that we need for Spirit? How can prayer support us in this? Because, so I'm a long-time Unity person. My family joined a Unity church when I was 7 or 8. And where I went, where I was guided, was into meditation. We didn't have prayer chaplains back in that time, for example. And so I mainly spent time in the silence, started praying or started meditating early. So I know how meditation can create space. In fact, every Tuesday when I get the prayer list, I read down the list, and then I take it into as spacious of a place as I can find in me. Because you know what? It doesn't really matter what I say. It's, can I hold space for Spirit? And in holding space for the names on that list, can I impact their ability to open to Spirit, to know that God is in charge. God is doing the work through you and through me. Our affirmative prayer is another way that we can open, right? Affirmative prayer speaks to the truth of who we are. And you can take affirmative prayer and make it into almost anything. I noticed she said that to know the mystery that knows the truth about the past, the freedom and the present, or the freedom of the present and the route to the future. You can say, Spirit in me knows the truth about the past, the freedom of the present, and the route of the future. I don't know what's going to happen, but Spirit in me does. I trust my true nature. Another wonderful affirmative prayer. It gets weaker when you say, my new red sports car is going to appear this week. That's more ego-esque, right? And if it doesn't happen, we tend to constrict. So what is it? If you just pause for a moment, what in you, what words or what posture, what way can you reconnect with space in you? Especially when it's rough, when something that you're very attached to is taken away. What will help you reconnect with the mystery that understands the past, understands the potential of the present, and knows the route for you to take? Is it a deep breath? Is it just pausing for a moment and closing your eyes? Is it a song or a poem? Is it a Post-it note at your desk or on your mirror? Or is it reaching out to a trusted friend who isn't trying to fix you, but instead calls you into that place of spirit? I want to point out something that Elizabeth spoke about, and I see it time and time again in not only my own process, but in working with others. That space is created when we stop rejecting the present moment. Like Elizabeth said that when the line from Dante's Inferno came to her, it was like a single beam of hope came into this darkness that she had been experiencing. And then she was able to embrace the sense of out of control, the sense of loss, the anger, the confusion. And right at that moment is when the relaxation started to happen for her. And so it's like we have to go through that portal. You know, we want to bypass it, right? I want to feel uncomfortable. I want to feel these strong feelings that come up. And yet, isn't it interesting if we're just willing to allow ourselves to feel them, that opens the portal for spirit. That's what space does. So Elizabeth, I want to close with just one more line from Elizabeth in this section. She says, it's not always about survival, this life that we're given. It's usually so much easier than that. It's about trusting the eternal life force that's flowing within us. Letting that force lead the way through all the invisible changes we will face across the span of our life or of our time here on earth. Can we let Spirit lead? Can we trust what's happening in our lives? Can we take action based on the guidance that we receive? Yes, we can. And when we do, the suffering begins to evaporate. The mystery of life becomes the experience, not the needing to hold on to what we thought we needed in order to be safe, to be happy. And so, when change gets you, find a way to create a place for Spirit. And watch how Spirit supports you, loves you, guides you, lets you know that everything is going to be okay. Let's move into some time of meditation. I invite you to take that breath, right? Especially if you're feeling any kind of contraction, breathe right into the contraction. This is your ego trying to control. Just gently, be gentle with it. Breathe. Invite the relaxation. And let's start this time by simply saying quietly to ourselves, not my will, but thine. Not my will, but thine. Not my will, but thy will be done.